All right. Well, some people must be out working on their tans. I am jealous. I'm a little under tanned here. Anyway, let's continue. First, a little class logistics. Even though I was part of the original team that decided to use Moodle, because we had to do something because it was cheaper than BlackBerry, Moodle has some problems. I just wanted a straight spreadsheet, and it calculates grades. And for some people that's a convenience, but it calculates the grades wrong, and you have to go in and tweak it. So, just so you know, total points possible at this point. So assume if you turned it in, you got full credit, but also maintain a record of it independently in case something got lost in transit. Like I had to fish a couple of midterms out of the spam filter. So otherwise, so your social recons, biopsycho social recons, research paper, personal diction inventory, and the midterm thus far would add up to, if you got everything, about 225 points. The midterm was worth 50, so the other 25 was reflected in extra credit, which did lower some of your grades according to the machine, which was actually happening. That's just an artifact of Moodle, so don't freak out. That looks like you got an F in extra credit. No, that's not what's happening. What's actually happening is it wouldn't let me allow me to put in 75 points for the midterm. So yes, I could adjust the midterm up, but in any case. So doing nothing more with everything in gets you a high C, which is not an invitation to slack off, naturally. So the final goes out in a week, Thursday, and just like last time with the midterm, it's due back on the 21st, along with whatever work you haven't done if you've been sick or affected by the outrageous vicissitudes of life. So, what treatment would look like once you're detoxed, outpatient or inpatient? Basically, what the person is dealing with is they're confronted with this total stranger they probably haven't met yet in their life, or at least since puberty, with all the things that have happened to you. And that's essentially what's happening with the client. And so whether you've gone through that experience or not, that's what they're going through. Sometimes that detox period can persist, particularly with prescription opiates, because while it is easier and a shorter quit period to quit from street heroin, since street heroin doesn't have any quality controls on it, you could also kill yourself by trying to use it to get off with it. So not that I ever recommend that, but many people know that already, that either are addicted to script opiates or have acquired them on the street. So again, once a person is detoxed and is entering either outpatient or inpatient treatment, you're basically confronted with this stranger, and it's a stranger to them too. Like, how do I deal with life unshielded, right? So at that point, it's our work. If remember the adage, it's not what's wrong with you, it's what happened to you, all right? So you might not be mentally ill, but that's the label that we've given you because it describes a constellation of symptoms. As it was with, when I began my career with these emotionally disturbed black kids. Well, they got the label emotionally disturbed because they couldn't sit still in class. And what 8-year-old should sit still in class after witnessing domestic violence from an alcoholic family and self-medicating with marijuana? But we didn't have a diagnosis like that in 1971. So we just slapped emotionally disturbed. People following the classic American drug cycle, which was caffeine in the morning and, alcohol at night. Then it was amphetamines in the morning, or, it's a very typical drug pattern we're seeing now with college students and other people training to be professionals. They'll claim ADHD. The docs don't necessarily check up on that, so now they're strung on Adderall and then getting prescription either Ambien or alcohol to take themselves off the Adderall. So for a time, they get really great work ethic, but then it starts falling apart on them, right? So yeah, were they ADHD for real? Or, that could also look like bipolar or manic depressive. Yeah, you're manic when you're on amphetamine and depressive when you're on, downers or alcohol. So I'm not saying that mental illness diagnoses are not real. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that the symptoms often match people's drug patterns, and they often self-medicate to deal with an underlying condition because they might not necessarily know how to deal with the trauma. So you might not be mentally ill, you might be just alone with your thoughts, undistracted for the first time in a long time. And then there, of course, is the question, if what happened to them was a horrific experience, how do they make a sane mental adjustment to an insane situation with no backup? How do they do that? So it's easier for us, it's been easier for the system, and that means us, to give them a label, give them medications without giving them skill. And that's part of what we're dealing with in treatment, right? So the practitioner has to be aware of themselves while this process is going on, because limbic resonance works both ways. Client may be freaking out, but you can't be, no matter how bad it sounds. Okay, you have to be calm and basically do that as part of the assessment process. Absorb what's going on and project calm. So they can pick up on your calm as long as you are calm. Say, am I crazy? Because they'll frequently ask, am I crazy? No, you're not crazy, but look at what happened to you. How else are you supposed to deal with this? So they can catch healing from you. So hence, that's why I basically had you do those assignments. So whether you took 195 or not, so the social recon, so you understand that it is the environment and the environment that they came from, personal addiction inventory, so you can understand how you self-medicate with food if you do, but even if you don't, understand that there's drug substances in food. And there's entire billion-dollar industries designed to string you out that way. I may be a type 2 diabetic, but nobody's going to think of that as an eating disorder. I personally think it's an eating disorder. Particularly when, certain populations, especially under stress, eat comfort food. And then the comfort food that we eat will induce diabetes. Neat trick, right? So food mood, money, diary, the media fast, give it up, and then cultivating mind-body disciplines that are older than Western civilization generally, so that you can begin to self-regulate your mood and your mood swings. We talked earlier about psychoneuroimmunology, so just in case that slide is not recently in your consciousness, one of the things that we're often dealing with and that you will find as a result of withdrawing from various drugs, so take marijuana. Not only is the brain getting stoned, but your immune response is getting stoned too, because the leukocytes, the white blood cells, are also absorbing THC and becoming less efficient. As you detox from THC, those cells wake up and you might get sick. You might catch whatever is going on. Also, the depressive cycle that you might be going on coming off of amphetamines. So understand, withdrawal is the opposite of the drug effect. The drug's an upper, withdrawal is a downer. The drug's a downer, withdrawal is agitation. The drug's a painkiller, withdrawal is painful. So their mood swings through withdrawal are going to throw out their immune system. They'll get sick, right? So there is, in this field, when we started looking at the relationship between mind, mood, and immune response, they coined a big 13-cent word, psychoneuroimmunology. Basically, if your mood is up, your immune system is up. Your mood is down, immune system efficiency goes down. So immune system response is also, of course, affected by drug intake, in particular, certain mind or mood altering chemicals. Marijuana is one of them, but any mind or mood altering chemical will do it. Also, certain diet in certain foods will make you susceptible. I haven't gotten the flu, and I've been surrounded by people. Normally, I could attribute that to sunshine, but this is our first sunshine in months. I was being depressed and taking vitamin D and meditating to compensate for that, for an extreme Hawaii deficiency. So, your immune system response is assisted by fitness, exercise, and emotional, mental, and spiritual exercise. So that's why mind-body disciplines, martial arts, yoga, etc. All right. So it should be pointed out, though this is not in the original construct, and unfortunately you got me, so I'm going to tell you about memes, and have told you about memes. The immune response is not just for biopathogens, but also for toxic memes. And since memes can come from anywhere, particularly people with certain, shall we say, extreme religious convictions or political convictions, or things that you've taken on where you basically, if you're an abuse survivor, you've taken on a lot of shame and guilt. That's going to have an immune system response too, and that's one of the things that you're going to be left with in the detox process. All right, so we also have to go in, and this is the time to go in and talk about what their feelings are. So for example, if they've gone through a breakup and the other person is hooked up with somebody else, there's jealousy. Well, jealousy is an indicator for the need for self-love. Anger is an indicator that there's been hurt. Self-heal correctly. Guilt, shame. So guilt is anger. Anger is directed at yourself, plus shame. And their shame also is connected with the regret. So take each one of those emotional pieces and heal those processes correctly too. So, not just pathogens, but also memes. So, as far as assessment and diagnosis, now that I know that there's a problem and I've described it accurately from their story, what do I do about it? Now remember, diagnosis is not just the professional. To have to know. What do I do about it? So not just the practitioner has to know, but the client has to understand what the clear path is too. What is the need the condition is trying to fill? So let's say that they are, so what I mean by that, just go to the next line, I suppose. If there is anger or depression, so those are indicators of certain emotional needs. And if they were self-medicating anger and depression, what need are they trying to fill? If there is anxiety, actually should be a comma there in terms of punctuation, but anxiety, what is the fear? Anxiety is a form of fear that's focused in the future. What are they scared of? Is there immediate danger? If there is, how do you deal with it? Now, a lot of times you'll get, for example, if a person has been strung on a sedative-hypnotic class of drugs, so alcohol, benzos, withdrawal will actually produce anxiety. Where all of a sudden they've got these feelings that something bad is about to happen, where no, it's simply the drug withdrawal. You used to cover up those feelings with the drug's not there, your nervous system is hyper-tuned, is there something going on, or is that just a feeling? And you get them to look at, where is that feeling centered in the body? Get them to look at that and work on that. Can it be helped with some kind of mind-body discipline, exercise, or hydration, simple hydration, right? If there is grief, what needs to be resolved? Somebody die? Did some part of you die? Did some hope or dream die? And so what needs to be resolved? Who needs to be forgiven if something was taken away? Or what do I need to let go of to move on? They may be grieving for a lost dream, or a lost relationship, or any number of things, or an actual loss. That's one of the things that we deal with in this business a lot, is death. A question that could be asked here is, what is your relationship with death? What do you think death is? Particularly with people who are either A, suicidal, for example, cutting, or using a drug, for example, intravenous injectable heroin, because part of the whole junkie mystique within the culture of that drug is shooting up, and how many times have you OD'd and been brought back? So they have this unrealistic picture of death. Sometimes cutters will be inflicting pain on themselves because they have not been able to express anger towards an abuser, so they turn the pain on themselves and feel that death would be a release from pain. So if they think that if the meme of death that they're working with is that death will be nothingness, death would be a relief, then they'll do things to kill themselves or put themselves in dangerous situations. So for example, just like one of the most common, especially with alcohol, you put yourself into an alcohol blackout, essentially what you're doing is putting yourself at the mercy of people, the goodwill of the people around you. Now, I'm from LA. I don't trust anybody that I know won't have my back in a life or death situation. And I either know that in advance or I know that from how they've treated me. So I don't get that drunk. But you know people that regularly do. And, get rolled or get hurt or get injured or injure themselves. Now, I won't say that that's a conscious decision or that they've made a conscious decision, but they have basically given up. Life has become painful enough so that they're willing to go unconscious enough to trust other people around them that are not trustworthy. How would you rationally do that? You wouldn't. So that means they're in the grip of very powerful emotional forces that they don't know how to cope with. Right? So that something has died. And so I don't want to live either. So I'm going to engage in long-time suicidal behavior, which, again, within the counseling framework, most people don't think of. For example, that kind of behavior is suicidal. But, if you're a gang member, part of the gang task force, and basically tried to explain to suicidologists, gang members don't give an F. That's what they say. So if they do drive-bys, if they, regularly drink 40s or whatever, or get engaged in behavior that would kill themselves, that they could rationally expect to die from, and they don't care, they're not thinking about living 20 years. They don't expect to live for another couple, and they're going to go out in a blaze of glory, and their homies will, pour libations on the ground to them, and they have this view of death that it's over. No pain. So look at what their ideas about death are and talk about that, especially, basically with people who are suicidal. You also want to look at their relationship with death. Who's died? How have they lost? How is death a solution? Now, to the degree that this gets recorded, or if you have an instrument where it gets recorded, you might just have to just remember this narrative in your head if there's no space for it to be recorded. Because, again, assessments are based on the worldview of the culture that generates the assessment. All right? So what treatment should do, and certainly there's an old counseling thing that tells clients you shouldn't should on yourself. So I'm just saying, in terms of looking at what treatment is, the majority of addictions treatment and addictions-related treatment is 12-step based. So if it's 12-step based treatment and it's inpatient, assuming you have the time and the focus, for example, step 4, fearless and searching moral inventory, which, okay, when you're talking about a fearless and searching moral inventory, the worldview is basically of the 7 deadly sins. How many of you are familiar with the 7 deadly sins? Can name them? All right. So that's a quasi-religious framework. And if you're not down, I mean, that's one of the things that people have problems with 12-step. The God thing. They're just not down with it because of experiences that they've had with the religious organizations.
Can you tell us what the 7 deadly sins are?
Yeah, I'm coming to that. Right? Okay? So that may or may not, I mean, if you read the big book of AA or the basic text of NA, you may or may not get a reference to the 7 deadly sins, but it's coming out of a Westernized Christian framework. So which of the sins do I use when I use or before I use? So as an example, lying or truth-telling, sloth or activity, I'm lazy, right? Pride or humility, right? So they are paired with opposites. Fear or faith, gluttony or content, greed or giving. One more, right? Anger or calm. Which, as a framework, is not bad because it does kind of cover the waterfront of some things by doing that kind of analysis. So, in one sense, for 1939, the 12, and basically for a grassroots framework where the dominant form of addiction treatment with alcoholism was electroshock therapy or lobotomy or ice cold baths, this is an improvement. But in the age of AIDS, we need something else. So actually, the steps and doing step work, especially if you do it sequentially, you do actually, if you were actually to work a step in a month, which is not explicitly what you do, but if you did that, you would actually go through, but we're not necessarily in treatment for 12 months. Treatment is based on compensation by insurance. And insurance will only compensate for 28 days because if you remember what I said about the military will only give you 1 day to get there, 1 day to get back, and if it's a 31-day month, then, so they give you 30 days, 1 day to get there, 1 day to get back, 28 days of treatment. And that's why it's 28 days of treatment. Wait, not everybody's in the military. Why do we do that? The ways of God and government are mysterious, and it's not given to mere mortals to understand their logic. But here, 7 deadly sins, right? So if you look at that in terms of what you have to do to use once you have a problem, you're going to be lying first to yourself and then to other people. The drug may itself make you lie around, or it might, if it's an amphetamine class drug, you seem like you're getting super productive. Some drugs will make you feel very prideful, like cocaine. If you're experiencing fear, some drugs will basically erase that fear, that anxiety. Sedative hypnotic class drugs. Gluttony. There is a term I made it up from German but it's following the grammatical rules of German. So the word, it's a Buddhist term though, and it's hungry Geist, or literally hungry ghost. So in Buddhism, what it is, it's a person who in life was gluttonous, but now they're dead, but they still have the same hungers, but no body to fulfill it. So what they do is they haunt other people. And so the image is of continually eating, and never being satisfied because there's no body to satisfy. And so some people's addictive behaviors are like that with particular drugs. Particularly like with cocaine, crack addicts. They're never satisfied. They'll never get as high as the first time they got high, but they'll keep trying to replicate that high. A hungry Geist. So in the original German, this is how hungry is spelled. It's only in English that we add the Y. So Poltergeist, noisy ghost or noisy spirit. Zeitgeist, the spirit of the times. All right, so this isn't a word in German, but all right, so if it's 12-step based treatment, that. So, beyond quasi-religious bliss, you need knowledge. So, pharmacology, neuroscience, psychology. So, even though I'm essentially a normie within the 12-step framework, that is, I can have a non-addictive relationship with substances. Basically, I've had 2 beers this year, which is inconceivable if, many people can't stop at that, right? So I'm a normie, right? So I was recruited to the field because I'm into the science. Why does LSD work? Wait, if it's destroyed after 3 hours, why do you have a 12-hour trip? What are you tripping on after 9 hours, right? They still don't necessarily have the answer to that, because that means going outside of Western psychology to begin to explain that. So, pharmacology, how do drugs work? Neuroscience, how does the nervous system and the brain work? Psychology, how do people think? And what I was describing when I first not only developed this class, but also started talking about what's starting to happen within the treatment world, the emerging interdisciplinary praxis, so praxis is where theory and practice come together. So not only looking at addictions, but also saying, okay, we need to also be dealing with exercise, people not exercising very well, and that's going to be part of the recovery, to have an exercise program, looking at nutrition, looking at your finance, because a lot of people messed up their financial life and never had the financial skills to begin with. And also some addictions are about money. Right? Gambling is part of the treatment, but what is gambling? Like, you can't abstain from using money. How do you do that? With eating disorders, you can't fast. What's your relationship with food? Now, I can simply say, because I've never had a gambling problem, okay, you gamble with money you have to throw away. Don't have money to throw away, don't gamble. Well, that doesn't work as therapy. I mean, yes, it's common sense, but I'm a normie saying it. I don't trust people. I think that casinos are like legalized thievery, where they don't roll you. The machines are designed to take your money. So why are you willingly trusting people to give your money? You must be getting entertained. But so some of your papers where somebody did a social recon in a casino and watched somebody go through a stack of 20s and then start feeding their card. And so they spent hundreds of dollars and they won back less than half of it, but kept playing. Like, how would you do that rationally? People don't, right? So, talking about finance, talking about community organizing. Now, there's a finding out of the science around how people of color recover from addictions. basically the finding is treatment is a waste of time if you don't have a recovering community to return to, of people just like you. So yeah, you can be a black person, middle-class black person going to Hazelden in Minnesota and getting clean and sober, being the only black person in a group full of white folks. But if you live in St. Paul, in a middle-class black neighborhood and nobody else is recovering, that's going to be difficult. So what? You go to white AA meetings, or same thing with Northeast Portland. So they actually have in Northeast Portland, among other places, Miracles, which is an entire housing complex of people who are in recovery that are African American, primarily. So community organizing means that part of your recovery is also organizing politically to make recovery-friendly communities. And that's actually been part of the new code of ethics for training drug counselors, is that now we're expected to do political action, whether it's working with the legislature or working to change communities. So politics is the science of power, how we deal with power, how we deal with power inequities, diversity, creativity. So asking people, for example, as I do, what's your art? Write your story down. Make a collage. Talk about some of your feelings. You shake your head. Yeah, go ahead.
AA, NA is non-discriminative towards race, sex, religion, blah, blah, blah.
Theoretically.
Right, well, so why wouldn't a black person go to an AA meeting? If that's the only one that's available and that's what works, then, right?
You want an answer to that, direct?
Sure, well, yeah, because I'm not understanding
Why it's an issue?
Yeah, why it has to, I mean, I understand the black, white, whatever issue, but I don't understand why it has to always be about a race issue.
It doesn't always have to be about race, but race is one of the most common and obvious discriminators. So, for example, did you hear me talk about the Bill W. movie that came through the Bijou a few weeks ago?
No, I think it was not aired.
Okay. So, Bill W. moved to New York City. And so this is the founder of AA, right? So he's in New York City, and he's basically finding all these different alcoholics. He goes up to Harlem and finds these two black guys who are just, you only need two alcoholics to have an AA meeting, so they're just meeting with themselves. So Bill takes them to his home group in Midtown Manhattan.
Which is predominantly white?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So, but it's on the same island, right? So it's only a few miles away. So he brings these two black guys to this AA meeting, and they take a vote, and they don't want the black guys to be there. So he actually takes a vote. Can they be here? No. Okay. Could black people benefit from AA? They take a vote on that. Yes. Well, how do you reconcile the two things? So the third vote was they can sit and watch and not participate so they can learn how to do an AA meeting in Harlem. Okay, so if that was the vibe in the 1940s, we often still find that same condition today in the 21st century. So much so that, okay, according to the neuroscience, people self-medicate. That's from that third view of addiction, maladaptive behavior. People self-medicate. And they self-medicate based on the most salient, the biggest problems that they face. So 75% of women in treatment basically self-medicate because of sexual abuse. This is why we have separate women's treatment. And AA was white male dominant. So they didn't even see the need for all women's treatment until like 20 years ago. And so all women's treatment also means not just all women, but women get clean and sober with their kids present. Because you have to do childcare because many women are escaping from abusive homes. That's part of the whole milieu of women's treatment. Well,
Unless you live in Oregon, in which case they just snatch your kids away and then throw you in treatment.
there is that too. That's true. Also, so that cultural mix along with 12-step treatment, when ethnic minorities try to bring up their wounding, and their wounding is racism. So for example, I'm bringing up a real world situation with an LCC student, not current, she's dead. She was sexually abused by her white stepfather who called her nigger bitch. And she was drinking alcohol in my ethnic studies class. So, so referring her to treatment, when she was out of that class, she was supposed to be in long-term residential in the local women's treatment program, and she was encountering ethnic slurs by staff and clients. And the staff were also saying that she was defocusing by mentioning the fact that she got raped while being called ethnic slurs. And that's what was driving her drinking. She said that. Well, they said, bringing up race is defocusing. No, bringing up race is talking about her central wounding as a black woman. Just because you're a white woman and don't recognize race does not mean you shouldn't be treating it. It is legitimate treatment. Okay? So coming from a strict 12-step framework, which doesn't necessarily have race in it, but could legitimately bring it up and treat it, because there are black women, 12-steppers, who create a treatment program serving black women and white women too. And race is a legitimate part of treatment. And I've shown you slides coming from them. Now, that's not local. That's Portland.
So we should have like different variations of the AANA meetings per race, you think?
They already exist. They already have gay and lesbian meetings too.
Well, yeah, I knew that.
Yeah. So, right. So you can do one of two things, and I actually can, depending on whether we have time, but I'll include it in the Moodle slides. There are various recovery frameworks. I just visited my website and noticed that link isn't there anymore, so we'll have to fix that. But what I'm going to show you is that there are different recovery